I think you and I should have a little conversation about general solicitation rules.
Okay.
So, when you're raising a venture fund, the SEC has something to say about it. You register your fund with the SEC. And while you're raising the fund, you're
Can't say.
basically not allowed to talk about it at all in public. And so the way this breaks down is you're only allowed to pitch what's called a qualified investors. These are people who have established a high net worth, or who you have a reasonable belief that they have a high net worth, or who you have a personal relationship with, or who have a high enough income level that they could be a qualified investor. And so you have to do all the pitching to raise a venture fund behind the scenes. And I think a lot of people just don't know or understand this. And as we were raising our fund, we were going around, literally physically going around the world to meet with investors. A lot of them are people we knew already or friends of friends, things like that. But you have to get introductions to these people and talk to them directly. You can't, for instance, post on LinkedIn that you're raising a venture fund. You can't make a website about this is our venture fund. You can't do any of that while the fund is open. And the day that you close it and are no longer open to new investors, then you can announce this. And so that's why you see press releases and stuff from venture funds saying, hey, we just raised a fund this big and we're doing this XYZ stuff. And so it's this really weird kind of catch-22 situation where if you're raising the fund, you're a fund manager and you're raising a venture fund, you can't publicize it at all. You can't spread the word in any public way that you're doing it.
Mhm.
And then the people you're trying to raise money from typically are high net worth individuals who are trying to keep a very low profile so they don't attract any more lawsuits and bullshit than necessary as it is. So you have this two-sided marketplace where neither side is
Yeah, it's like a
exposed.
cloak-and-dagger marketplace.
Yeah,
That's what we should call it. It's
yeah,
like
dagger
like
market.
this the
It's
cloak-and-dagger marketplace is definitely what it is. It's funny because I remember I was head of investor relations slash infrastructure. I don't know how that happened, but basically I was the guy that was like, oh, get on a plane, and we were raising. It was like a $500 million fund. It was
okay.
crazy, right? And this was our second fund, so we weren't even first time fund. Like we already had a $500 million fund, so we
Okay.
weren't first time fund managers. And we went to a guy, ex UBS fund person,
Yeah.
and we had our fund register. We had all the stuff, we had all the structures, half offshore, onshore, God knows where it was. And our advisory, so we had an advisory. And then I remember they're like, all right, this looks like our roadshow. And the roadshow was an infinite number of meetings. And then every meeting started from scratch. They had limited context. Of course, they're qualified because they're institutions. So a lot of them, if they're ultra high net worth, it was different. And then you have to go through into these qualified one-on-one positions. But there are entities that they make a lot of money just
Yeah.
on introductory services, on like backroom speakeasies for the cloak and dagger marketplace.
Yeah.
I think it's probably easier to buy secrets and nuclear weapons and find the right
Oh,
parties.
yeah. I've done all those things before. That was easy.
That's a lot
Raising
easier.
a fund is like totally cloak and dagger. Well, and I don't know about you, maybe with a $500 million fund, but like we would never use any of these kinds of brokers or people in the middle to like raise the fund for us. So those guys in the US, you have to have a licensed
No, no,
registered
this was
broker.
like UBS. These were like
Right?
full
UBS,
broker dealers.
you could do that. And maybe for a big fund, they would do it.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
but if you're a small fund or a first time fund manager, your LPs don't want you wasting money on people who are going to raise the fund for you. So it's a weird thing. Like we would use them. And we have a lot of people who approached us, some of whom are registered, some of whom are like, I'm not a registered broker dealer, but we can find a way to compensate me based on performance, which you're not allowed to
You know
do.
what's sad
So,
about this? What's
what's
sad
that?
about this is
Yeah, it is
they
sad.
did the Jobs Act. No, they did the Jobs Act,
Yeah.
and they made it a lot easier to start to talk about raising capital, right? There used to be
Mm.
blue sky laws. There used to be rules around finding an investor. Do you make $200,000? Do you have 2 million in cash? All these like little questions. Or are you a
Yeah.
qualified investor? That bar got dropped real hard, like real low in
Well,
all these crowdfunding. Not even crowd, like these small angel kind
So
of
you
like things.
but that's 506c. So if you do that, so there the way around this, and
But
so
I'm saying they didn't help the fund managers.
yeah,
It
yeah,
helped like
right.
the professionals who actually care about how you're raising money. You might actually give a shit about doing. It's harder to do that than it is
Yeah,
to probably raise a $25 million pool of capital randomly amongst people who may not be qualified. You could be in a boiler room or a wine cellar, and just raise money versus an actual fund manager who
yeah.
can't talk about it.
Right. And they can market the shit out of it and get all the but what's interesting is, like, for us, we wouldn't do that. If you do 506c, then you can market it and you can say you're raising a fund and all that, but the problem is every person that you take into the fund, then you have to do qualification for. You have to prove they're a qualified investor. So you have to ask them basically to show their tax returns, which maybe unwitting grandmothers are willing to do, but you're not going to get any of the high net worth
No legit, yeah, no one legit's
funds
doing anything.
that. Like, we would never ask our
And it
investors.
only took how long to get Trump's tax return? So, I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. We didn't ask him to join the fund, but we were not going to ask for tax returns. Anyway, I thought it would be interesting to just talk about that. But for people who haven't done it before, if you're thinking of raising a venture fund, you really need to understand. When we were going through this process, I kept arguing with my team and lawyers. I'm like, can't we just do a little bit of press about investments we've done in the portfolio? Because even while the fund is open, we were investing quite a bit. And they're like, nope, can't talk about it. And then I'm like, can I at least put the portfolio on the website? Nope, don't do that yet. It could be a problem for general solicitation. Like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, can we do an infomercial on deep cable or something? And they're like, fuck no. So it's a
so
real
you're trying to be a hacker and a fund manager.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you're asking questions they don't like.
No, I got shut down on
Yeah,
all of it. And so we were
yeah.
very conservative. Our fund is closed, of course. And so now we are able to talk about it more, which is actually a lot of fun. But man, it's a weird constraint.
No, I remember when we first met, and you're like, "Shh, listen,
Don't tell anyone, but we have a venture fund. Yeah.
do
Exactly.
you look rich?" And that's the other thing, right? Like, how do you? It's like when you go up
Is
to
that a
someone,
All the Back t shirt you're wearing?
is that a Birkin? Like, come here,
Exactly.
right?
Come here. Bring that Birkin
Come into
over
the
here.
back.
No, I
Bring
didn't see their tax returns, but they had a Birkin bag. So I qualified.
that. Exactly. Dear FINRA, I used the Birkin test. Is that a good litmus test for the,
Okay,
but
cool.
it is.
That's that on
I'm
general.
gonna add one more thing on the fund thing. One of the things that I've always, and again, why we came up with our thing that we mentioned, the reason is it really drove me crazy. Like when you look at the regulatory framework for what I would call non monster $7 billion funds, it's impossible. Like it's difficult to be a startup venture fund and startup venture fund all in one word, as opposed to a startup comma venture fund. And the reason is they've just made it because there have been some bad actors,
Yeah.
clearly. There's like a number of them. I mean, there's stories, countless stories. Kid raises 25 million in a fund, and no one knew like where he was, and he was in detention because he hadn't left high school yet, and stuff like that. And the problem was, it's really made it difficult for people who have either specialized knowledge or very specific types of things that they're trying to pull or promote. And you're doing deep tech, so you've got a narrow, deep, clear understanding what you want to tackle. You're not spraying and praying, but you are, but like in a different way. The problem is it's hard for you to function. And
Yeah.
my whole theory was it's not only that the fund manager suffers, their ecosystem suffers because their
Yeah.
ecosystem then either is falling foul of these rules or they have to do things like, yeah, we'll figure out a way to compensate you. So now everyone, the alignment of compensation is broken. And it really goes back to the only people who benefit are, again, those licenses, and I've got this and I've got that. And I hate, I'm not a big fan of everyone's got to have this and this. And I'm sort of like, wait a minute. So you're telling me our Rolodex, 17,000 people in my Rolodex, and I can't possibly introduce someone and get rewarded or
Yeah.
remunerated in some way because I decided not to set a Series 7 and don't have a broker dealer license
Exactly.
because I have better things in my life to do.
No, that's actually a really important point. And when you know these people who are super connectors, you and I know some, these are
Yeah, we
people who are
probably are.
They're doing something very important. It's actually a lot of work to get to know a lot of people, understand what they're interested in, figure out who would be a good match, take on the reputational risk of making connections for them. These people who are super connectors are very important. And I think there's not a real business model for them. People are always taking advantage of them. And so we really try to figure out how do we make it worth their while.
That's why we built the London fund, right? That's why I have a means of giving comp.
Now you've got a
And
system down. Let's do an episode about that sometime.